Welcome once again to another episode of The Wall Behind and Beyond. I am your host, Philliip A. Jones. Today on the show, we are speaking to someone who has over 24 years of experience working as a corrections officer in a maximum security prison in the state of Pennsylvania. His lived experience consists of thousands of hours, hundreds of men's stories. Despite the darkness behind the walls of concrete, steel, and pain, this brother has witnessed firsthand stories of hope and transformation. Please welcome to the show, Rich Jacobs. What's good with you, fam? How you doing?
Great. Thank you, Alvin. And yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I'm good, man. I'm holding on, maintaining, man, and I'm doing it how it's supposed to be done. I'm just happy to have you as a guest today. And I have some questions for you.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
So tell us where you're from and a little bit about your background.
I'm from a town called Pottstown area in Pennsylvania, about 40 miles from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm 65 years old. Went into the United States Army when I graduated from high school and when I was 18 years old. Did a bunch of different jobs for 20 years, and then about 24 years ago, I began working with the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, one of the largest maximum security prisons in the United States and the largest maximum security prison in Pennsylvania.
I've seen that in your bio, and that's impressive. And you kind of intrigued me, and I wanted to talk with you because when I heard about your book and the things that you were doing, it made me wonder, what was your thought process in terms of how it is to work, not only just work in a prison, but how did you feel about that? But I'm gonna ask you another question. What made you want to get involved in corrections? And did you just think it was a good career, or what was that about?
Right. So I started working in corrections simply for a job. I don't know of anybody that's ever grew up and wanted to be a correctional officer inside a prison. A lot of times kids grow up and they want to be a policeman, but I never really knew of anybody who wanted to be a corrections officer or anybody that wanted to work in the prison. I started working there just for a livelihood. And then one of the things that I quickly learned when I did work in the prison system is that some of the most talented and loving people on the planet are in the prison system, especially the old heads, the ones that have transformed their lives, which in my experience, 99% of the old heads have transformed their lives. And another thing that really wasn't even on my radar screen until the last couple of years before I retired earlier this year was this whole wrongful conviction injustices that are out there. That one really caught me off guard. So I started really studying that and looking into that the last few years.
Man, I'm very happy to hear you say that. When you talk about talented and loving, and a lot of these guys transforming their lives, I'm happy to hear you say that because a lot of people don't understand or believe that there's people inside who come in, they might be misdirected, but after they mature and after they educate themselves, they become just like anyone else. I often tell people in prison, they're your neighbors. They're the same people that you knew that were out. They happen to do something that ended up leading them to the system. But at the same time, there's still those people you grew up with. And so we got to be ever mindful of that. So I appreciate you saying that. And that was a good point that you made.
Yeah, the fact is, and the studies show that those who were criminally minded, they age out after 10, 20, 30 years, they age out. They're no longer, even just by default, they're no longer the people that they were. And the recidivism rate, and this is one thing I don't understand how and why the legislators don't look at this, but the recidivism rate, which I've heard for the 25 years that I've been involved, was always up to 2/3, and that really has never really changed. But for those older folks, the recidivism rate is less than 1%. 1%. So it's like,
Mhm.
what are we doing about that?
And that's what we need to talk about. That's what my show was all about. Lifers, like you said, lifers and older dudes and that's incarcerated have the lowest rate of recidivism. Like you said, less than 1%. So that tells you right there, long prison sentences or life sentences and all that, they're not necessary. Because once a person realizes and becomes the grips with, the fact that they can become better, that they have served their time, that they have used their time to educate themselves, they normally go home and be productive members of society. And so, again, you said it. We have to go back and revisit these things. Otherwise, we're wasting a lot of money and taxpayers' money and resources. So, did the conversations you had with incarcerated individuals shape or influence what you felt about the criminal legal system?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. In other words, like you mentioned earlier, I've spent thousands of hours talking to hundreds of men, many of them lifers, in the correctional setting during my career. And I started out as a correctional officer. Then I even went into the maintenance department for a couple of years after I started out as a correctional officer. And then the last 18 years, 18, 20 years, I was a vocational school teacher to the men. And so I seen in multiple roles the humanity behind these men. And these are guys that I would easily vouch for or let them live in my house. It's 99
Mm-hmm.
it's 99% of them. It's like, you get the rare case
Mm-hmm.
where you might have serial killers or something, but that's not what's
Mm-hmm.
in that's not in our prison system. It's everyday people that committed crimes of passion. They have to pay for it for the rest of their lives, unfortunately.
Hey, man, Rich, thank you for pointing that out, man. Like I said, I love talking with somebody that understands and knows. You've been there, you've been around, you saw. Um, and listen to what he said. Serial killers and people like that, that's not common in prison. I mean, that's like 1% of the population. Like, so people think that prisons are full of these type of individuals. Maybe they can't be changed. Maybe they can't be fixed. But think about it. Your success rate is very high. And in any other business, a 99% success rate is phenomenal. And so we gotta get away from the stereotypes. And I know what you're saying because you said you was a vocation teacher, you was a maintenance worker, you was a CO. And I see all that here. The vocation teachers, they work with us hand in hand. The maintenance supervisors work with us every day hand in hand. So they get the chance to gauge who you are and not just a number. And they say, hey, man, this is a good dude, man. I don't even know why he's here. I hear that all the time. And so, man, I appreciate you coming on. They can hear it from you, someone who actually wore the uniform and was a part of the system. So thank you so much, man, for what you had to say.
Yes, my pleasure. And in fact, one of the passions that I've had for the last 5 years before I retired was to share stories of hope and transformation by those affected by the criminal justice system. So I spent the last 5 years trying to figure out how to publish books. And thanks to the 21st century print on demand, where we're no longer average people like yourselves and I and your listeners can now publish books on Amazon, and we're not beholden to the large publishers. And then AI
Mm-hmm.
came along, artificial intelligence come along, and that really helps out with the editing to make sure you get the punctuation straightened out.
Mm-hmm.
And now we can all level the playing field a little bit, and that's pretty much what I've been busy
Mm-hmm.
doing, publishing the different books.
Well, I'm going to get to that right now. Thank you for bringing that up. But I do want to comment on that. I too have books on Amazon, and you're right. It makes it levels the playing field. It makes it easy for the average person to publish a book. You ain't got to go through these big publishing companies and, figure out how you're going to, whether or not they want to take your work or no, you self-publish. So the world is just changing, man. And for those of us that's incarcerated, it has been a tremendous help all the way across the board, because now we can also go out to the community, put our work, do great things. And so that I just want to tilt my hat for that. And I'm glad to see that things are changing as far as evolution goes. But I want you to talk about Get Free and Stay Free. What is the idea behind this concept, and what is the goal and mission of it?
Yeah, so Get Free and Stay Free is a nonprofit organization that I created within the last year or so. And underneath that is the publishing, as I had already mentioned, of stories of hope,
Mhm.
information, and transformation. I published four books. The first three, I partnered with two other organizations. The two that I'm most proud of was the one book, Stories of Transformation, that during COVID, the prisoners had a contest. One of the inmate organizations had a contest where the young bucks, the younger prisoners, wrote how the lifers were inspirational to them to help them transform the way that they think. And they had a contest, and some outside organization typed it up and put it on sheets of paper. But so what I did with them is I partnered with them, and I professionalized it into a book. So it's their stories straight up, and really good stuff. But then the latest book that we just came out with just a few months ago is called Lost Voices of Prisoners Serving Death by Incarceration in Pennsylvania. I titled it In Pennsylvania and niched it down to Pennsylvania simply because I'm from Pennsylvania, and the men and women who shared their stories is in Pennsylvania. But of course, that's a universal, nationwide thing as far as lifers go. A lot of in the state of Pennsylvania, if you get a life sentence, it's exactly what it says: death by incarceration. You're not getting out unless the governor commutes you, and that rarely ever happens. But the stories, there's 30 stories, firsthand accounts. Six of them are women, and really excruciating stories. One that sticks out in my mind is a 5-year-old girl. One of the stories in the book was she was brutally raped by her brother when she was 5 years old. And she went to the hospital and got all stitched up and came home. And the police were going to come to the house. And the mother said, "Now you listen here. When those police come, you tell them you fell in that metal chair over there." And
Mhm.
imagine growing up
Mhm.
underneath that kind of situation. And
Yeah.
but nonetheless, all 30 of the stories are really amazing stories. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback because doing this book, especially since I'm a member, a staff member, or was a staff member in the correctional system. It's that in itself is a unique concept. And the foreword was written by a lifer, and it's just the whole idea is to not is to show that these are not statistics. And I was at an event
Mhm.
about a month or two ago, and one of the people who was sharing about my book said to the state senator about the you know why it is that things are so punitive against the system. And I had always thought it was a lock them up and throw away the key mentality, which a lot of it is. But this one particular state senator said, "Oh, no, I just don't know anything about them." And that kind of surprised me, and
Mhm.
and kind of made this book, make a little bit more sense, so that it's
Mhm.
the real stories behind the numbers and the statistics.
Man, that's powerful, man. It's excellent. And I was going to piggyback on what you said. So what you are doing in essence is introducing those who may not know who some of these men and women are, that they are human beings, that they're not what the stereotype says. And when they read these stories, they get an insight on who they're dealing with, and it gives them a more of a conscious when they're making decisions, legislative and otherwise. And PA is also a lot like Maryland. In my state, Maryland governor, he got up there and said life means life. Not the one in now, but years ago. And for a very long time, we couldn't make parole, no matter if you had a parole sentence. And so I definitely understand what you mean by death in prison or death by incarceration, because that's exactly what it is. There's no room for redemption. And that's what I'm trying to achieve in my work, is to show that people can reform. People can redeem themselves. People can become whoever they want to become as soon as they educate themselves and change their values. It's just a matter of giving people second chances.
Exactly.
So, do you believe that the system is not set up for defendants to be treated fairly? One side has to pay for resources and representation, while the other side has unlimited funding and resources. And, the reason I ask you that is because the level, we talk about the playing fields being level. If we want the system of justice to be fair, then we have to make sure that there's a balance in allocation of resources and representation, so that there is a fair trial. And I mentioned that and asked you that as someone who used to work inside, because I just want to hear what your perception is, or your perspective is on that.
Yeah, there's no doubt at all that the criminal justice system is broken. It has been broken. I don't know, maybe forever. Who knows? In the old days, I used to hear it said often that the American justice system may not be perfect, but it's the best in the world. I don't even really hear that too much anymore, but
Yeah.
but what really stuck out to me was right before I retired, or no, actually 2 years before I retired, a guy by the name of Termaine Hicks. He was a prisoner in my prison. Real awesome dude, real sharp, one of the most respectful guys for the whole 20 some years I was in there. And then he worked in the law library. And then during COVID, he got out. And that evening, he was on the NBC News with Lester Holt. And
Mhm.
his story was right after 9/11 back in 2001. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. He was working to his job, and a girl was walking to her job at Dunkin' Donuts, and she got brutally raped. He heard her screaming. He went to help her, and by the time the police rolled in, they say, "Get your hands up," and he puts his hands up, trying to explain to the police that he was helping her, and they shot him 3 times in the back. Then they quickly learned that they messed up, and they carried the little 38 snub nose to plant
Yeah.
on people whenever they knew they messed up. And oh my goodness
Yeah.
gracious! So then I heard him speak at our local one of our local churches after he got out, and then I got so impassioned about this concept, and I went to my one of the deputy superintendents of the prison, and I said, "Dep, what's up with what are we doing about wrongful convictions?" Because then it occurred to me that a lot of people were just wrongly convicted, and when you hear wrongful conviction, there's times that there's technical issues, which I don't have as strong a feeling about that as I do with actual and factual innocence, where the guy wasn't even in the neighborhood at the time, but they picked him,
Mhm.
because he had a bad rap sheet or whatever. But anyway, the deputy, I said, "What are we doing about this?" And he says, "Rich, you got to think we're corrections, we're care, custody, and control. That's not our thing to advocate or
Mhm.
to do." And and he had a point. I couldn't argue with that point. But to answer your question, yes, the system is definitely definitely out of whack, and that's just one of those things. I wouldn't even know where or how to begin to do anything about it. And
Yeah.
I remember when the politicians used to come into the prison over the years, and the lifers and the different inmate organizations would get all excited about a politician coming in, and unfortunately, most of the time they just wanted their photo op. And I told the guys, I
Mhm.
said, "Look, man, you guys, we got to figure out how to, transform lives by ourselves and not look to any politician to do it." But then again, at the
Yep.
same time, I do understand that we need the politicians to change laws too. So it's just one of those real big challenges.
It's definitely a big challenge. One of the you said a lot, and one of the main things that you said was about this notion that here in America we have the best system, even though it's flawed. Bullshit. I did an interview with the Norwegian guys, and their system is 10 times better than ours. And I'm not saying advocating any prisons. I'm just saying that don't sit here and tell me that this is the best prison system in the world and you treat it so. No, that's not the case. Because if you fail to give humanity and respect people's dignity, then they will never be okay. That's trauma. So I'm looking for compassion. I'm looking for mercy. And some of what you were saying about what are we going to do about this, it's crazy because you have the mindset that you want to make some changes, and you don't want people to depend so much on some elected official coming making a change in an environment such as prison. I feel like whether you're guilty or innocent, prison is somewhere where you should come so that you can rebuild yourself, so that you can, work your way back to your society and your community by showing that you have changed. But we have to have the right programs and tools to be able to do so. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot of warehousing going on. So I'm so glad that you said something like that. This is real life, man, and we're probably in this country. We have more people incarcerated than anywhere in the world combined. The statistics probably have changed, but I've heard that so many times, and I'm subject to believe that that's the case. So we got this industry going on, and we have to get away from just locking people up as a local economy. Like, hey, let's just build a prison and put some people in there, and let's just pay some people to work. No, that's not healthy. It's not going to make us a better nation. So I appreciate that. So, Rich, what's next for you in terms of work and advocacy? I know you got a few books out, and I want you to, mention them all. But what's next for you in terms of work and advocacy? What do you think you have next on your agenda?
So yeah, I want to now that I'm figured out how to publish these books, and now I got to figure out how to get them out there into the marketplace. And as you may know, there's an old saying that says you can build the best mousetrap in the world, but if nobody knows about that mousetrap, it isn't going to do any good. So now I'm starting to figure out the marketing end, going on one podcast at a time like this, looking into the influencer space. There's a lawyer out of Philadelphia by the name of David Ravosky. He's been in the business for 50 years, advocating for men like yourself and women, and he has a prestigious law firm. And I sent him a copy of the book. He was real interested when he heard that I was doing a book like this, because even though we have success stories of transformation spread all out over the internet and different platforms, I don't know that there's many books that have it all at one spot. So that's what I'm trying to do. But unfortunately, it's an uphill battle because I'm just one person, and but that's my passion to get this word out there, and eventually, my vision is to publish stories of inspiration and transformation to one niche market at a time, beginning with those impacted by the criminal justice system. So after I publish 5, 10 books, and then we'll go to another niche market. Perhaps those, off the top of my mind, the next niche market might be those stories of transformation by those affected by mental illness, which that is a whole nother unfortunate area that we all struggle with, the whole human race, from garden variety
Mhm.
depression to full-blown schizophrenic and that kind of thing.
Man, that's awesome. We was just talking about mental health in my reentry class that I was teaching the other day, and you'd be surprised. A lot of people didn't know that they had suffered from mental illness, and then one of the staff members actually said, "We all suffer from mental illness on some level, in some form," and so that is very important that we try to take care of our mental health. But you talked about the promotion and going out there touring around and making people aware of what you're doing. Well, thank you for coming on this show, because on this show, that's what we do. We bring awareness to issues dealing with the system, advocacy, reentry, returning citizens, second chances, you name it. If it got to do with prison, inside or out, you know what I mean? We talk about it, because so many in our population, they don't have a clue about what's really going on. And then when you finally talk to them, they're surprised. So we want to look the people up and give them some information that they could best use to benefit themselves, or maybe a loved one that they have who is still inside. You know, so follow Rich, check out his books. And what would you like the listeners to take away from this interview before you go, Rich?
So what it is, it's in fact, if I had the email that I just received today, I received an email from somebody, and they said they couldn't believe, or they were speechless and couldn't get out of their mind the first three or four stories that they read from the book, and they were looking forward to continue to read the book over the next few days. And that is the humanity of the whole concept. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
I could be, or anybody. This is probably the biggest thing right here, that anybody listening or reading the transcript to this podcast could very easily be put in prison overnight for the rest of their lives for a crime that they did commit, or maybe didn't even commit. Just that quick, it could happen, and then that's the end of it. We don't talk about it no more. We don't do anything about it. So my whole thing would be that I would hope that the listeners would just take the time out of their busy lives to just listen to these real deal stories of like you had mentioned earlier, of your neighbors. The United States Department of Justice tells us that every week of the year, 10,000 prisoners are released into our neighborhoods and communities every week of the year, and up to two-thirds go back into prison. How and why are they going back to prison? We study and we look at we always want to look at the negative, the two-thirds, and why they went back to prison. Well, if it is that high, why don't we look at the one-third who did not go back to prison? Why don't we study that? Why don't we listen
Mm-hmm.
to those stories?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because those are the stories that help us to understand how to keep everybody else out. And that's also why empathy is so important. Because anyone, I don't care who you are, from P. Diddy to Donald Trump, you can find yourself in prison or sitting in a cell, depending on your life circumstances or where you are on the totem pole. But you're not exempt, because there's a possibility that you could find yourself in here for something you did or didn't do, like Rich said. So we got to start being more empathetic, and we got to stop throwing away our people. We got to get to the root cause of crime. And a lot of times it's got to deal with drug addiction and so many other things. It's not that the person is just evil. It's not just that people are walking around trying to harm people. So we got to look at it from both sides of the spectrum. How can we balance our public safety with also compassion? So I appreciate you, man, for real, man. And what you're doing is amazing. I'm going to go and get your books myself. So y'all go out there and check out Rich's book. He's got 4 of them. He's coming out with some more, but stay plugged in. In fact, how can people follow you or purchase your books?
Probably the best way would be just to go to the website instead of trying to figure out remembering the title of the books. And the website's pretty easy to remember, and it's getfreeandstayfree.com. That word "and" has to be in there because somebody else has the other website where it's getfreestayfree.com. But in this case, we got to keep the word "and" in there. Getfreeandstayfree.com.
There it is there, man. Y'all stay up with that and check him out. He said, get free and stay free. You got to keep that "and" up in there. Go check out the website, purchase the books, and then let us know what you think. And we're going to bring Rich back and you can talk about some more because he's going to keep coming out with some good work. But, man, it's people like you, man, that makes a difference. It's people like you that change minds, man, of people who may have thought, I got to go in there and treat them bad. They're bad people. I'm going to go in there and put my foot on their necks. And, it's all about respect. It doesn't matter whether you got a uniform on or whether or not you're someone sitting in a prison cell. It's all about respect. Treat your people and your neighbors as you would want to be treated yourself. And that's all I have to say on that subject. But it was nice having you, man. And it was a very, very interesting conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Philip, and I'm honored to have been here. And actually, you just lifted me up as well, because as I continue to do this one man work as far as my organization goes, hopefully somebody will go to that website and a few folks will come join me so that we can move forward.
Each one reach one. This ain't no one-man crusade. It's going to take us all. It takes a village. Right. All right, man. That's a wrap.